You've been told that K2 is the loneliest, most dangerous mountain on Earth. A savage peak, reserved only for the world's most elite climbers. You've probably seen images of solitary figures battling the elements on pristine, vertical walls of ice. But this is K2 today. On the rare summit days, teams who've waited impatiently form lines in the death zone, paying customers, queued up, waiting for their turn to stand on a summit that was once the ultimate prize in mountaineering. The legend of the savage mountain is being sold off, its reputation rewritten, not with skill and courage, but with commercialization, money, and do or die, we're going to make it to the summit. This isn't a story about taming a beast. It's a story about how commercialization has changed everything on a mountain once believed to be the most deadly mountain in the world. K2, exposing clients to unprecedented dangers. How did the deadliest mountain in the world become a playground for paying clients? And what's the price being paid for it all? For decades, K2 was mountaineering's purest challenge. At 8,611 meters, it's the world's second highest peak, but it's always been first in terms of difficulty. In 1953, an American climber named George Bell, on an expedition where the Americans would nearly reach the summit for a first ascent, Bell was quoted to say, "It's a savage mountain that tries to kill you." And it does. Historically, for every 5 climbers who reach the summit, 1 climber dies. That quote by George Bell became the name of a book about that season on K2 called K2, The Savage Mountain. It really should be required reading for anyone interested in going there because it tells a deadly story about what the mountain can do when it rears its ugly head. The book was written by Charles Houston and Bob Bates, who were both on that expedition. It took such a great toll on Charles Houston's life that he, being one of the great mountaineers of his era, never went back into the mountains again. Literally said,
"Finish. Been there, done that." That was it.
So what about this mountain? How did it go from being the savage mountain, one of the most deadly mountains in the world, to something more watered down, with expedition operators luring people in with not necessarily a guarantee of getting to the top, but almost a sure thing. People who have never even been near an 8,000 meter peak, people without even the knowledge of how to tie a knot into a rope or to put crampons on. K2's dangers are legendary. The climb is steeper and far more technical than Mount Everest. Climbers have to navigate treacherous sections like the infamous bottleneck at about 8,000 meters in elevation, where the 2 main routes, the Abruzzi Ridge and the Chesson route, meet, and it forms a deadly bottleneck, thus giving it its name. Many people have lost their lives there. One of the most notorious incidents in 2008, when a gigantic chunk of ice fell from the wall above, where climbers walking on the tiny sidewalk underneath the cliff were caught without a place to run. Several disappeared. And then there's the weather. K2 has a different weather system than in the Himalayan mountains, where Mount Everest and the other 8,000 meter peaks get the monsoon season in June. In the Karakoram of Pakistan, the monsoon arrives later, so the climbing season, the best summit days are usually toward the end of July or the very early days of August. All these things are changing now with varied weather patterns over the last 5 or 10 years. All right, let's get real for a second. You know, confidence and feeling ready doesn't just matter on the mountain. They matter everywhere in life. And for a lot of guys who are experiencing intimacy issues, feeling their best means being present, connected, and ready when the moment is right. That's where Row Sparks comes in. It's a fast-acting, dual-action treatment that dissolves right under your tongue. And after it dissolves, it starts working in about 15 minutes on average. The dissolving design means it gets into your system faster than a traditional pill, and it can keep you ready for up to 36 hours. It sounds to me like that's a way of taking care of yourself, to feel steady, confident, and in sync with your partner. Row makes it convenient to start. You just complete an online visit with a licensed provider, and if approved, your treatment ships right to your door in discreet packaging. Everything is done online. If you want to see if it's right for you, connect with a provider at row.co/sparks. The link's in the description of this video, because performing your best shouldn't stop at the trailhead. For most of its history, the mountain was climbed by expert teams working closely together. There were no fixed ropes from top to bottom, no armies of support staff, and zero guarantees of whether anyone, let alone the entire team, would get to the summit. Summiting K2 wasn't an achievement, it was a testament to persistence, patience, and teamwork. And the routes themselves tell a story of challenge. The Abruzzi Spur, the traditional, most popular line where most of the climbers go these days and have traditionally, it rises along the southeast ridge of K2, carrying climbers through the mountain's most notorious obstacles. And then there's the Nicholson route, which lies to the west of the Abruzzi Spur, starting more directly from the base of the south face. It's much steeper at the start with exposed rock and ice gullies, but because there are far fewer climbers on that route, there's far less likelihood that rocks will be kicked loose from above, which in the past seasons has been terribly tragic. In 2025 alone, 2 climbers died from rocks falling down the Abruzzi Spur route. Several others were notably injured, severely broken bones and severe concussions that could impact them for the rest of their lives. And until around 2000 and shortly thereafter into the 2010s, when the mountain became commercialized, only about 350 climbers had made it to the summit, and the death to summit ratio was high. It was about 20 to 25%. And in many of those years, no climbers would make it to the summit at all. 0 climbers, sometimes for years and years in a row, that nobody would get to the summit. And then as commercialization started to make the mountain more accessible to paying clients, the numbers skyrocketed. In 2023, on a single day, 142 climbers made it to the summit. But this commercialization, while it does bring a lot of people to places that nobody really belongs, it also has its downside. There have been a lot of disasters up there. One of the most notable ones going back to 1986, another in 1995, and then in 2008, and more recently in 2021, significant disasters where there was a major loss of life, where people were trapped up the mountain, and because of the technical difficulties on the mountain, they were unable to get themselves down, resulting in a great loss of life. The change was gradual and then all at once. The commercial model that turned Everest into a crowded highway on a few days of the year migrated over to the Karakoram. Nepali and Western guiding companies saw a new market, paying clients eager for a summit, regardless of their skill. Now, I will say there are 2 different models essentially on K2 for expedition operators. One that is more of a Western mindset, European and American guiding companies who place an extremely high value on the idea that a client will not die on the mountain. And even though the percentage of people who die on the mountain has gone down, the summit to death ratio about 5%, the Nepali operators, generally speaking, place a higher value on getting people to the summit despite the difficulties. And therein, those operators have been the ones resulting in the loss of life for clients. Notably, in 2025, there was very poor weather, a lot of rock fall, and many of the teams, all the Western teams, bailed on the year. 3 Nepali outfitters stayed on the mountain. On the descent from one of those summit trips, a Chinese woman was killed by rock fall. The numbers are actually pretty staggering in how much things have changed over the years. From the first ascent in 1954, when the Italians placed 2 men on the summit, through 2018, 350 individuals had summited on the mountain. And then the floodgates opened in 2022. Over 140 climbers reached the summit on a single day. And by August of 2023, over 800 people had stood on the summit of K2. The once empty slopes on those rare summit days became clogged with people who did not have the experience that would have given them the right to some years before. Here's the truth behind the marketing fiction. If anybody tells you it has been tamed, they're wrong. K2 has not been tamed. The danger has not diminished, but what has changed is the climber profile. Many clients go to the mountain dangerously inexperienced. I'm cutting to a clip of this footage that was taken in 2025, and this is in no way meant to shame these climbers. It just shows that these crampon technique training sessions in base camp would never have been seen there only 10 or 15 years ago. For a person to climb on K2 going back to the 70s, 80s, and 90s, one would have had to have been an extremely experienced and brave climber. It was where the best of the best went. And now there are people who have never stood on an 8,000 meter peak going there thinking, let's go have some fun on a mountain, witnessing sometimes horrible tragedies. The new reality came into horrifying focus on July 27th, 2023, when 27-year-old Pakistani porter Mohammad Hassan fell high in the death zone above 8,200 meters. He was ill-equipped and was not equipped at all for high altitude climbing, but to make a little bit more pay. The pay is so meager for the porters down in base camp, for some $3 or $4 a day. He wanted to make some more money and insisted and went up the ropes behind the rope fixing team. He fell upside down, still clipped into the rope under the area described earlier called the bottleneck, right underneath that massive cliff of ice and seracs. And he remained alive there for hours. I have several videos about this tragic accident that took place there that I'll link in the description. To learn more about the mountain, you really should take a look at these videos. His death was really a direct consequence of a commercialized K2. And then in 2025, only about 40 people made it to the summit, but there were 2 deaths on the mountain. In the beginning of the expedition, early on in July, an avalanche knocked some rocks loose, and a porter named Iftikhar, Hussein died. And then Jing Guan, she was a client of Imagine Nepal. She was killed by rockfall on August 12th on the way down from the summit. This took place after all the Western teams had pulled out. Notably, a guest of this channel and a friend of this channel, Ryan Mitchell, who was there with Madison Mountaineering, his summit guide didn't like the vibe and didn't like the conditions that were taking place up in the mountain, and therefore they pulled the plug about a week before these other teams left for the summit. With a little bit more caution, any team that turned around very possibly saved lives, and unfortunately Jing Guan was a casualty of do or die, we're going to get to the summit. So for a client who is interested in going to K2 to climb it, they will need to ask themselves, what level of risk am I willing to take in order to get to the top of K2? Do I put the highest value on surviving with caution to hire guides who exercise caution and skill in reading the conditions on the mountain? Or am I willing to take greater risks, go no matter what, even if the conditions say it's going to be a little bit chancy? What would you do in this situation? And since the commercialization of the mountain has really increased rapidly, the death rate on the mountain, as I've said earlier, has gone down dramatically, 5%. But for guides and expedition operators like Adrian Ballinger of Alpenglow Expeditions, he says 5% is still way too high of a risk factor to take clients onto a mountain. Historical context underscores the danger. In '86, 13 climbers died, including 5 in a single storm. In 2008, 11 died when a serac fell in the bottleneck. Not all in that single serac fall, but several disappeared, and then other climbers were trapped up high. And despite valiant efforts, climbers from below were unable to reach climbers who were up there, and 11 died. These tragedies, combined with modern overcrowding, shows the mountain's lethal constancy. It is still a savage mountain. Climber beware. It looks like about every 10 or so years there is a significant disaster. It's always waiting to happen. And now some companies refuse to run K2 expeditions because of that. I talked about Adrian Ballinger and Alpenglow Expeditions. He will not run expeditions to K2 because of that imminent danger. 5% death ratio, while sounds low, if you were to take teams there over the course of 2, 3, 4, 5 years, it almost guarantees that one of your clients is going to lose his or her life. So others might sell the illusion of safety, but the truth is anything that falls from up high lands all the way at the bottom. That includes a human being. The savage mountain is indeed still very, very savage. For decades, K2's brutal reputation shielded it from commercialization, but the floodgates have opened. So the question that remains is not, are you skilled enough to try to climb K2? It's, are you willing to take the risk to climb K2 despite all the dangers given the overt commercialization of the mountain? If you think these stories should continue to be told, please be sure to subscribe to this channel. And YouTube seems to think that you're going to like this video right here over my shoulder. And also be sure to check out the member section where I have tons of exclusive member content. Do a good deed, don't ask for anything in return. Make the world a better place, one tiny step at a time. Peace be with you.